Hi, I'm Adam Zonder, the production manager for the Hangar Theatre Company, and welcome to another episode of In Good Spirits. As we have gone virtual for the 2020 summer season and everyone is working from home, I'm currently sitting in an empty theater, which is very odd considering it's the middle of the summer. Between the ongoing pandemic and this being my 25th season with the Hangar, we thought having some conversations with the various designers and technicians with whom I have worked over the years would be fun and in good spirits. I would like to take a moment to give a big thank you and shout out to our series sponsor, Myer Farm Distillers, located in Ovid, New York. Joe and his team produce various award-winning vodkas, gins, and my personal favorite, bourbons. Please check them out at MyerFarmDistillers.com. Today, I'm having a conversation with Sean Rocke, a good friend and recently, until the pandemic hit, an administrator with the Blue Man Group, Chicago. Great to see you. How are you today, Sean?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Good. So let's start at the beginning, so to speak. How did you originally get interested in theater?
I fell into it entirely by accident in high school. I had a friend who, going down the list, picking elective classes to take, and we needed to fill in a spot, and she said, I'm going to do this theater thing. And I went, okay, I don't know what technical theater means, but I'll do that with you. And from then on was kind of got bitten by the bug. Happens to a lot of people. Quickly learned that I did not want to be in front of audiences, which also happens to a lot of people. So then tried to figure out how I could best use my sort of natural skill set to do things. So I started to do a lot of broad behind the scenes work. I, helped build the sets and run the light board and all of that kind of thing. But gradually discovered with the help of our, advisor there, that I was very good at keeping people on track, keeping people organized, and being sort of an assistant to the director of the program, which is a thing that I didn't know existed at the time. And so I ended up going to college to be a stage manager, which is a lot of those.
Evansville, right?
Yeah, at the University of Evansville, which takes a lot of those sort of raw skills and makes it into something a little bit more structured. Helping to run rehearsals, helping make sure that the show comes off the way that it's supposed to, making sure everyone has all the information that they need, kind of starting to be an administrator behind the scenes for a show-by-show basis. That was where it all began.
Great. So your first season of The Hangar was 2011 when you were the production management intern, also known as when I was able to convince you to leave stage management and join the production management side. Anything from that season stick out to you?
That first season, so as the intern, I was working a lot with the drama league directors and doing the wedge programs. And I think we were still at Ithaca High School for those shows. And I specifically remember having a conversation that had to do with the amount of glitter that could or could not be in one of the wedge performances and having to talk through like, okay, if you want this, here's what X, Y, and Z have to happen for cleanup and turnaround time and all of the other things that a creative decision can spark lots of other follow-ups that we need to think through and follow out and make a plan for. It ended up not having nearly as much glitter as was originally proposed.
That's probably good. Yeah. Glitter is always an exciting thing that when it happens on stage. You then returned for the next 2 seasons as my assistant production manager, which, I'm pretty much guessing that means you liked it. So how did you find those seasons?
Overall, all 3 of my years at the Hangar were a great time to learn as I worked. Like I mentioned, my degree is in stage management, and I didn't really know that production management was a thing when I was in college. We had a technical director in our program, but we didn't really have someone who served the same sort of a production manager role as you get in professional theaters. So it was a lot of learn while doing, and getting to take a step back from just looking at a show and starting to look at the bigger picture of a full season or a full year in the life of a theater company. I know before my last season there, I was helping you remotely with some like scheduling and calendar ideas for looking far into the future. And being able to take that step back and use everything I had learned on a show by show basis to get a broader picture of what running a theater company what is involved with that, has served me really well in what I've gone on to do since I was there. So very, very grateful that I got to, jump in and figured all of that out, as I also just got to like be in Ithaca and make cool theater.
Great. So after the Hangar, you went to Chicago and worked in production management for Chicago Shakespeare Theatre. So other than a longer season, how is PMing there different than the Hangar?
Everything is more complicated.
In what way?
It's a much bigger company. So just based on full-time staff, not even thinking about all of the overhires and part-time and hourly staff that are involved, there's so many more people who are invested in a lot of different ways in the outcome of a project. So one of the things I think that you have to do as a production manager is translate to all of your different various audiences, all of the information that's in your head, whether it's to a designer or a director or a technician or an administrator or an artistic director or a marketing manager and that team of people is just exponentially bigger at an institution the size of Chicago Shakespeare Theatre, or a Blue Man Group for that matter. That's a different kettle of fish. But the way that you have to think about communicating just gets that much more complicated, because you never have all those people in a room like you do at the Hangar. You get everybody in a room, get everybody on the same page. It's not quite the same when you have a company that's 150, 200 people, all with their own agendas, who all still need to get the information on what's happening right now.
Is that 150 to 200 including the actors?
No.
That's just staff.
Staff and like consistent overhire technician, hourly employees, but not nobody contracted. Yeah, so that would be an additional however many. Yeah, it's a big operation.
Clearly. And then for the last almost 4 years, you were part of Blue Man Group, much more as an administrator than anything else. How did that come about?
In my time at Chicago Shakespeare Theatre, I started very much as a production manager, but moved into a role managing the production office. So sort of serving as the administrative hub for the team of production managers, the team of administrators, everyone in the production department. That position had a whole lot more HR and finance responsibilities that interfaced with the rest of the building. So those skills were really a jumping off point to move to Blue Man Group. They needed somebody who could do basically HR and finance for the Chicago location, and then help interface with, at the time I was hired, the other cities, and then by the time I left, the Cirque du Soleil, because we were acquired by Cirque du Soleil about 2 years ago. So talk about working for a big organization. That went from, we had about 100 people locally for the Chicago Blue Man Group team, and then we became a part of this, thousands of people, large group that's owned by another even bigger company. So talking about translating for different audiences and communicating to different audiences, that became a huge part of my job, because it was everything from telling the production manager, what her budget limitations were for the year, to reporting back what our wardrobe supervisor had spent on something, to the director of finance in Montreal, who doesn't know who any of these people are or what you're doing, but just needs to see, trends on paper, right? Like it's a very different conversation, even if you're talking about the same thing that you're purchasing. So being able to kind of shift gears and talk to all those different stakeholders has been really important.
So when you said that you were coordinating with the Blue Man Groups in other cities, had they moved Blue Man Group headquarters then to Chicago?
No. At the time that I was hired, there was still somewhat of a headquarters in New York. We have Blue Man shows, permanent shows in Las Vegas, Orlando, Chicago, Boston, and New York. And that's not taking into account various tours. So at that time, there was still sort of an administrative office in New York that did a lot of the oversight of like company-wide health you know, company-wide initiatives, company-wide HR, company-wide big picture planning, that administrative and artistic planning. And then that entity sort of got either absorbed into or split up into Cirque du Soleil when the company was bought.
Got it. I understand. So I'm assuming then that the Chicago Blue Man group, the show was basically the same.
Mm-hmm.
So how was that different from your other experiences where you have the same show, never closing, save, you know, the worldwide pandemic?
Yeah, right.
In.
Until now.
Right.
It's very different. I mean, the similarity, I think, especially coming from Chicago Shakespeare Theatre, this is an exaggeration, but it sort of runs like a consistent company. You get a lot of the same people back a lot. So even though the creative team or actors in a show might change from performance to performance over my 3 or 4 years there, I've mostly worked with a pretty set group of people. So you are managing those relationships over a long period of time. Directors and designers working together over many, many seasons, things like that. That is very similar to working for Blue Man Group, where you're helping manage relationships and continue the smooth running of a show with the same group of people over a really, really long period of time. So the problem solving happens in a much slower way sometimes. You're not faced with as weird of a like one-off, we have to solve this problem for this show, and even if the solution's just okay, it's fine because we'll close in 3 weeks and no one will, it'll be in the past.
Right.
You have to solve a problem in a way that might last for 10 years because the show's just going to continue to go on and on and on. So the scope is a little different, but it was a different transition from like working at the Hangar, where you might never get the same team of people together again after the summer's over, to Chicago Shakespeare Theatre, where it's much more like cyclical, to Blue Man, where it's just like, this is the family, we got to figure out how to make this work. People stayed there. There were a lot of employees there who had been there for 20 years.
Wow.
So it's a very unique position for theater companies. Like you don't often get that many people who stick around for that long.
No, that's pretty impressive. So, with people staying that long, and you were there for 4 years, and obviously I know you would still be there, save what's happening in the world right now. So what's been so appealing about it? Because obviously at some point you probably would get tired of, the show.
My office shared, the back wall of my office was the back wall of the theater. So you could, especially during matinee season, hear the show a lot. And if, like you said, it's always the same. Like we implemented some changes over my 4 years there, but day in, day out, it's the same. All it really took, if I was feeling burned out, was to go in and watch the show with an audience full of people seeing it for the first time, because that is a huge reminder of just like, even if I've heard this literally hundreds of times, somebody's getting to experience this for the first time. And it's, whether it's, a kid there with their family or a bunch of teenagers there on a band trip or whatever it is, like it's the best day of their month, year, and just getting to get that hit of like, this is why we're still doing this. It doesn't matter if I'm tired of it some days. These people haven't ever gotten to do this before, and they think it's the best thing ever. So that is all it takes to kind of get reinvested in it and be like, oh, right, okay. This is someone's first time being in a theater. This is somebody's first time getting to see this show. And it's an institution at this point. It's been around for a long time. So getting to have people bring their kids who remember seeing it 20 years ago, which is pretty neat to be able to continue to provide that experience to people.
That's fantastic. So does Blue Man work on like the standard, 8 show a week schedule, or are they on more?
It depends on the city. So the Chicago location, it fluctuated wildly based on the season. The fewest shows that we would do is about 7. So we might have like Monday, Tuesday, no shows, and then performances ramping up into the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
During the holidays, we would do as many as, I think the biggest week we did in my time there was 24
In a week?
performances in a week.
Wow.
Yeah, so we would do quads, which is 4 shows a day, 11, 2, 5, and 8. And we would do up to, you know, whatever the math is on that, like 5 or 6 quads in a row, and then maybe a triple on Sunday to like start to slow it back down. So Sunday late night show didn't sell as well. So yeah, anywhere from 7 to 24 shows in a week, which is a big shift, and makes a lot of like, that creates a lot of questions about how can you staff for that, and how do you, you know, bring in extra cast members? How do you bring in extra cleaning crew? Like all these questions operationally, that it can't just be rinse and repeat every week, because some weeks are so radically different. Some of the other cities have it easier for that. So I think Vegas has the same show schedule all year round, because they are kind of just like, this is what we expect, here we go. So they do more like 8 or 9 shows a week, pretty much year round. But we were, we fluctuated pretty wildly.
Sounds like it. And roughly how many standard cast members do you have? Because obviously people get sick, people go on vacation.
Yeah, for sure. Our full-time cast in Chicago was 6. So, you know, 3 per show, but we had 6 guys in town. And then we had 1 person on the bench, which just basically meant like you're an emergency. He had been full-time and he went off to start teaching, so he didn't want to be there full-time, but if someone gets sick, has a vacation scheduled, we could schedule him in just for a weekend or whatever. During the holidays, then we would bring in other guys from other cities, from other benches, to do a little training pickup, and then to run the extra rotations that we needed to run, basically.
And roughly how much in advance did you know that you were going to have to send in one of the substitutes?
For the holidays, we would know months in advance. They'd line up who was going to which city and give us our extra staffing. If someone had to swing in for the weekend, maybe, I don't know, a month or 2. Our stage manager and our production manager handled all of the scheduling for the cast and the band. So they could, you know, look a couple months out, make sure that they had the schedule set, fill in any holes in the operation, and call in a backup if we needed to. Really, really rare that we'd have anybody go out unexpectedly. And sometimes, like, we had one of our cast members recently had a kid, and we were on baby watch, so there was always somebody assigned to be the backup for his performances for, like, you know, the week or 2 before they were expecting their baby, so that if he got the call, we knew who the plan B was, so that we didn't have to scramble. But that's an unusual, you know, that's an unusual circumstance.
Great. So can you tell me one of the more interesting, fun stories about Blue Man? Do you have any?
What sort of interesting and fun? I mean, to be honest, I don't know that many people would find what I was doing at Blue Man to be fun. Most of my job, especially toward the end, was very, very finance heavy. So unless you are sort of person who thinks that writing the budget for the next fiscal year is fun, that's my personal experience in that corner is maybe a little short. We had one thing that is fun that we got to go do a lot of is, you know, Blue Man is so recognizable. We would go and do a lot of appearances and gigs with a variety of different organizations, teams, all sorts of things. And one of the most fun days that I got to see at the theater was, there was like a Jurassic World exhibit that was going around for a while with like animatronic dinosaurs. Did you see anything about this? It was very cool. It was around the time the Jurassic World movie came out, and it was at the Field Museum in downtown Chicago, this exhibit was. And they had a animatronic puppet, like human-operated raptor that was super cool. And we convinced them to bring the raptor in to do a guest appearance at one of the shows. So this like giant animatronic raptor came in down the aisle, and the Blue Men tossed him a steak, and he like roared and scared the audience. and walked back out. And, you know, doing a tech day with an animatronic dinosaur for really no reason other than that it was a cool cross promotion was just an example of the sort of random, fun, goofy stuff that we got to play around with. And one thing that's nice about having a show that is template is that it's kind of easy to be like, here's the spot where we can kind of insert in this weird little new thing, and then just go back to, you know, press play on the normal show, right? No one will know, there's no script that we're upsetting anybody by changing or adjusting. So we can throw in fun, playful things like that when we have the chance.
I love that. That's great. So since you are now much more in administration, do you ever miss stage management?
No.
You're welcome.
That's not fair. That's not fair. I felt early on that as much as I loved being in the rehearsal room or calling a show, being in the booth calling a show, I knew that the lifestyle of stage management, going from project to project to project, having to move a lot where the jobs were, was not going to be a good fit for me. And I don't regret that choice. It's sort of a rare thing to be able to find a stage management job where you could kind of like put down some roots. And I've, you know, been fortunate to be 4 or 5 years at the last couple of places that I've worked, and those jobs exist, but they're rare for stage managers. So it's been nice to be able to use some of those skills to still be involved with the art and the artists, but to be able to have something that for me was a little bit more sustainable. It's just not something I'm hardwired to do.
Nope, I understand. So based on the pandemic and everything else that's happening in the country right now, do you have an opinion as to where theater and live performance might be heading?
I don't know. It's been really interesting to see places try and adapt. And I feel like I've seen everything from, you know, our model, which was we have to close until it's safe to reopen, pretty much full stop, to more what the Hangar's been doing with digital performance and figuring out new ways to harness technology to kind of get us through the gap. I think it'll be, realistically, at least in Chicago, I think it'll be a while before we can all be in one room seeing a live performance. Like, it seems like that's a ways off. So I'm interested to see one thing everyone who works in theater is good at is adapting to the unexpected. So it's, you know, it's interesting to see those creative problem solvers try and tackle this, whether it's a short-term fix or something that will end up being so successful that we do it a lot in the future. The only thing I wonder about with like digital performance is that that's such a crowded market with like, even just with YouTube or like Netflix or streaming and all of that. Like, it's interesting to think about how that will be competitive with all those other options in a long-term way, but hopefully we'll all be able to be back in a theater together sometime in the future. I think nothing can never really replace being in a room with other people, getting to experience something. Like, as much as I'm so glad that we have online communication things that we can do, it's still not the same as just being in a room with everybody. So hopefully someday, vaccines.
I am right there with you. Yeah. I love to be in the same room with other humans again. It would be great.
Not in that big room all by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Thank you very much, Sean. I'd like to once again thank our sponsor, Myer Farm Distillers. And thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, of course.